My dad was one of those WW2 kind of guys. He just thought if you worked 12, 14 hours a day, 7 days a week, and you put food on the table for your kids and a roof over their head, well, that fathering stuff could be checked off the list. Well done. But when my father died, I have to confess to you, I was frustrated and frankly hurting. And one day as I was cleaning out my garage, I stumbled over this old relic, my dad's rusty fishing tackle box. You can see here, I pried it open and I saw the remnants of my dad's life. And I remember looking in there and pulling out these old lures and saying, "Is that it, God? Is that all that's left of my dad?" I remember throwing it back there. And to be honest with you, I was angry. I was angry at God. I was angry at my dad. I knew that was dumb because he was dead. It accomplished nothing to be angry, but I was. God, why couldn't you give me a dad that could say the things I needed to hear? Some simple things like, "Son, I love you. Son, you're a treasure in my life. I'm so proud of you, son." But I didn't really hear those things. And for some strange reason, don't ask me why, I missed my father's signature. And oh, how I wished for a letter from him. So I did what all men do when they get stuck. I called my closest friends, about 12 of them, and I asked them 3 simple questions. Guys, do you have a letter of love and blessing from your father? P.S. on cards that Mom bought does not count. Do you have that kind of letter of blessing? No. From 12 men, no. Next question. What would you give for it if you had it? A response was a pause, usually. More than you'd ever know. Final question, I'm going to leave you alone. Have you ever written such a letter to your children? Pause. No. Don't you think we should? Bingo. At that moment, a ministry was launched called Letters from Dad. And as we began to write letters of blessing to our wives and our children and our parents, God did a mighty work as we learned not just to speak blessing, but to put them in writing. Frankly, I believe it all came down to a question that I began to ask men. And it went like this. Men, God, your heavenly Father, if he thought it important enough to write you a love letter called the Bible, shouldn't you do the same for your children? You see, learning the power of the written word, it changed our lives, and it changed the destiny of our families.
My name is Bodie Spangler, and I'd like to welcome you to the Be the Dad colleague training. In this session, we will learn how to give your son or daughter something that they were born to receive, specifically from you, their father. You see, when God knit your child together in their mother's womb, God himself put in that little boy or little girl a need that they will never outgrow. And that need is to receive your unconditional blessing. Today, we're going to learn how to give the blessing that your children so desperately crave. Besides the Bible, the most meaningful and significant book I have ever read is a book called The Blessing by Gary Smalley and John Trent. The book shows fathers how to give their children the blessing their children crave and are born to receive. It also illustrates the power of that blessing. And what I love about the book is that it breaks down the blessing into 5 specific parts. The first part is a meaningful touch, then a spoken word, attaching high value to the one being blessed, picturing a special future for the one being blessed, and finally, an active commitment to help them fulfill that blessing. I'm sitting here today talking to you because my father did that for my sister and me. I wish I had 2 or 3 days to share with you his entire story, but I don't. I only have 2 or 3 minutes, so I'll start at the end, and maybe one day I can come back and can start at the beginning. As I watched Greg Vaughn share the story about his father, I thought of my dad. Greg and I have different stories, much different, except in one way. Greg's drive to teach others about a father's blessing was born from heartache, and so was mine. A few months after I graduated from college, I received a call from my mother telling me that my father had died. It's one of those calls you never want to get. My dad had dropped dead on the tennis court at the age of 49. Mom was a widow now at the age of 46, and all of a sudden my sister and I lost the single most influential person in our lives. 2 days after I received that call, Mom, my sister Claire, and I went to the bank and opened that safety deposit drawer that you hope you never have to open early. Now, we were looking for his will, the insurance papers, and some other important paperwork that we knew had to be there. And when we opened the drawer, we did find all of that, but on the very top, we found a treasure for all time. On top of the will and the insurance papers, we found a handwritten letter from my father that had been updated over time. Dear Bonnie, Bodie, and Claire, if you're reading this, that must mean I'm not here anymore. He opened the letter with a section for my mom, encouraging her and what he knew, if it ever happened, would be a difficult time. Now, I'm sure my dad thought my mom would be reading that letter when he was 90 and she was 88. Then he turned his attention to my sister and me. Bodie and Claire, I want you to know how pleased I am with the adults you've become. And he talked about some of the recent successes we had both enjoyed. Then he said, I want to remind you both that I love you. I'm your father, and I love you. And he talked about that. Then he closed the letter by writing, Bodie, your Annapolis education will serve you well for the rest of your life. God has a special plan for you. And he had a similar section for Claire about Baylor. You see, my father was reminding us one final time, as he had countless times throughout our lives, that even if the whole world was crumbling down around us, even if the whole world was against us, he, our Father, was for us. Our Father was in our corner. So my Father's final words to me were, I'm pleased with you, I love you, I'm for you, and God has a plan for your life. Now, if that letter had been all that there was, it certainly would have been amazing and meant a great deal to my mother, my sister, and me. But my father told me those 4 things over and over again from the day I was born until the day he died. So the things in that letter were not a surprise to us. That blessing that he gave to me is the most powerful thing I have ever experienced. Now listen, every time we hear someone's story, we filter it through our own lives. I know you probably did that as you listened to Greg share his story about his father, or when you just listened to me share my story about my dad. And I want to make sure that you hear 2 things clearly and loudly. First, I want you to know that no matter what your experience is or was with your own father, your Father in heaven loves you, and he loves you unconditionally, and he will never leave you, and he will never forsake you. The second thing I want you to clearly understand is that you, as a father, have an amazing opportunity with your own children to pass on to them a blessing that will fuel them for the rest of their lives.
Letters from Dad didn't just become another program. done in a local church or prison, but it became a movement in the hearts of men. Our marching orders from God became a prophetic verse neatly tucked away in the last book of the Old Testament. It was from the book of Malachi, chapter 4, verse 6. Here's what it says. Before the great coming of the Lord, He is going to do something powerful, something mighty. Here's what He's going to do. God will turn the hearts of fathers to their children and the hearts of children to their fathers. You see, that's what God is about today. Men, let me say something to you kindly, lovingly, but firmly. God, our Heavenly Father, wants all of us to step to the plate and be the dad He's called us to be.